The fluorescent lights of the CVS hummed with a clinical indifference that made my head throb. I stood at the counter, my fingers trembling as I reached into my worn leather wallet. It was thin. Poverty has a way of making leather feel like loose skin. I handed the pharmacist my debit card, the one linked to the meager pension I'd earned after 43 years at the tool and die factory. I needed my blood thinners. Without them, my chest felt like it was being squeezed by a rusted vise. The total on the screen read $84.20. I knew I had $100. I'd balanced my checkbook at the kitchen table just this morning, right next to the bowl of water I'd put out for Buster, my old golden retriever. "I'm sorry, Mr. Carter," the girl behind the counter said. She didn't look me in the eye. She was young, maybe 20, with glitter on her eyelids that caught the harsh light. "It's declined." I felt a hot flush of shame creep up my neck. I looked at the line forming behind me, a woman in a designer coat checking her watch, a teenager scrolling on a phone. To them, I was just a slow old man holding up their Tuesday. "That can't be right," I whispered, my voice cracking. "Could you run it again? Just once? I might have swiped it wrong. These machines, they're a bit finicky for hands like mine." She ran it again. The same beep, the sound of a door slamming shut. "Still declined, honey. Do you have another way to pay?" I stepped aside, my legs feeling like lead. I pulled out my flip phone, my thumb hovering over my son Mark's name. I'd given him power of attorney 6 months ago after my dizzy spell. He was supposed to be managing the bills so I wouldn't have to worry. I called. 1 ring. 2. It went to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. I looked at the bag of medicine sitting just out of reach on the counter. My heart gave a jagged little flutter, a reminder that it was tired of waiting. I walked out into the Ohio wind, the cold biting through my thin VA jacket, feeling smaller than I'd ever felt in my 79 years. When I got to my old Chevy, I saw a bright orange sticker slapped onto the driver's side window. It wasn't a ticket, it was a repossession notice, and as I looked down the street, I realized I'd have to walk the 3 miles home in the snow. The walk took me nearly 2 hours. By the time I turned onto my street, my toes were numb and my breath was coming in ragged, shallow gasps. I kept thinking about the factory. 43 years I'd given them. I'd survived a shrapnel wound in the highlands of Vietnam and 3 decades of grease and steel, all so I could have a quiet life with Martha. But Martha had been gone 5 years now, and the house felt less like a home and more like a museum of things I couldn't afford to keep. I turned the corner, expecting to see the porch light on. Instead, the entire block seemed to glow, while my house sat in total, suffocating darkness. I fumbled with my keys, my joints aching so badly I nearly dropped them twice. When I finally got the door open, the silence was heavy. Usually, I'd hear the rhythmic thump, thump, thump of Buster's tail hitting the hardwood. "Buster?" I called out. "Hey, big guy, I'm home." No response. I clicked the light switch near the door. Nothing happened. The air inside was already dropping toward freezing. I felt my way to the kitchen, my heart hammering against my ribs. I found a flashlight in the junk drawer. I shone it around the room, the beam landing on the kitchen table where I'd left my checkbook. Beside it sat a letter from the utility company. I didn't need to read it to know what it said. I looked at Buster's corner. His bed was there, but he wasn't. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through my exhaustion. I searched the house, calling his name until my throat was raw. I found him in the basement, huddling near the water heater for warmth. He looked up at me with cloudy eyes, whining low in his throat. I sat down on the cold concrete floor and pulled his heavy, warm body into my lap. "I'm sorry, boy. I don't know what's happening. Mark was supposed to take care of it." I stayed there for a long time, the only sound the wind rattling the old window panes. I finally got my phone out again. My battery was at 4%. I called Mark one last time. This time, he picked up, but it wasn't the voice of the boy I'd taught to fish at Buckeye Lake. It was the voice of a man who sounded like he was talking to a nuisance. "Dad, I'm busy. I told you I'd handle the accounts. Stop calling the pharmacy and the bank. You're confusing everyone." "The lights are off, Dad," I said, my voice trembling. "And they took the car. I need my medicine." "I'll look into it tomorrow, Dad. Just go to sleep." Then the line went dead. I didn't sleep. You can't sleep when you can see your own breath in your living room. I wrapped myself and Buster in 3 wool blankets, the ones Martha had crocheted, back when our biggest worry was the price of gas. I watched the sun crawl up over the Dayton skyline, a pale, sickly yellow. My chest felt tight, a dull ache spreading toward my shoulder. I knew the signs. I worked through the pain, forced myself to stand, and started walking toward the bank. It was 2 miles away, and my legs felt like they were made of glass. But I had to know. I had to understand why a man who never missed a day of work was suddenly a ghost in his own life. The bank was warm, too warm. It felt like an insult. I stood in line, clutching my VA ID and my Social Security card. When I got to the teller, a woman with a kind face and a name tag that read Sarah, I tried to smile. I probably looked like a madman, blue-lipped and shivering. "I need to check my balance," I said. "There's been a mistake with my auto pay. My utilities are off." Sarah tapped away at her keyboard. Her smile faded. She looked at the screen, then back at me, her expression shifting from professional kindness to deep, gut-wrenching pity. "Mr. Carter, there isn't an account here anymore." I blinked, the words not making sense. "What do you mean? I've banked here since 1974. My pension goes in every month on the 1st. "The account was closed 3 days ago," she said, softly, leaning in so the people behind me wouldn't hear. "The funds were transferred to a joint account held by Mark Carter, and then that account was emptied. It looks like a cashier's check was issued for the full balance." I felt the floor tilt. 43 years of sweat, Martha's life insurance, the small nest egg we'd built for the golden years. All of it gone. "But he's my son," I whispered, more to myself than her. "He has power of attorney to help me pay the bills, not to take it." "He had full access, sir," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." I turned away from the window, the world blurring into a smear of gray and beige. I walked toward the glass doors, but before I could reach them, I saw a familiar face through the window. It was Mark. He was across the street, standing in front of a real estate office, shaking hands with a man in a sharp suit. They were standing next to a large photo of my house with a bright red banner across it that said, "Sold." I pushed through the bank's heavy doors, the cold air hitting me like a physical blow. I didn't care about the pain in my chest anymore. I didn't care about the shivering. I crossed the street, my boots crunching on the dirty slush. Mark saw me coming. He didn't run. He didn't even look guilty. He just sighed, the way a parent sighs at a toddler who won't stop crying. He said something to the man in the suit, patted him on the shoulder, and walked toward me. "Dad, what are you doing here? You look like hell. You should be at home." "Home?" I spat the word, and it felt like glass in my mouth. "I just saw the sign, Mark. I just came from the bank. You took the pension. You took Martha's money, and now you're selling the house? Our house?" Mark grabbed my arm, his grip too tight, pulling me away from the storefront. "It's not our house, Dad. You signed the deed over to me last year for estate planning, remember? You're 79. You can't keep up with the taxes. You're forgetting to turn off the stove. You're a liability." "I'm your father," I said, my voice rising. People were starting to stare.
I worked double shifts at the factory so you could go to Ohio State. I wore the same pair of boots for 6 years so you could have that car when you turned 16. How could you do this?" "I'm doing what's necessary," Mark hissed, his face inches from mine. "I've got real-world problems. You're just sitting in that drafty old tomb waiting to die. I'm moving you into the Heights. It's a facility. They have doctors. They have people to deal with you." "I'm not going to a nursing home." I tried to pull away. "The papers are already signed," Mark said, his voice turning cold and flat. "The movers are coming tomorrow morning at 8. I'd go home and start packing the small stuff if I were you, though honestly, most of that junk is going to the dump anyway." He turned and walked away, getting into a shiny black SUV, the kind of car my pension probably paid for. I stood on the sidewalk, the wind howling around me, realizing I had no money, no car, no lights, and in 24 hours, I wouldn't even have a door to lock. I looked down at my hands, the knuckles scarred from years of manual labor, and for the first time in 50 years, I felt a tear escape and freeze against my cheek. I turned back toward the long walk home, but as I stepped off the curb, my vision swirled into a kaleidoscope of black and white.
The asphalt was freezing against my face. I could hear the muffled sounds of the city, a bus braking, a distant siren, the frantic clicking of high heels on the pavement. Someone was screaming, "Call 911! This old man just collapsed!" I wanted to tell them I was fine. I wanted to tell them I just needed to get back to Buster, but my tongue felt like a dry sponge, and my right arm wouldn't move. It felt like it belonged to someone else, a heavy, useless limb attached to a body that had finally decided to quit. Everything went black, then white, then a dull antiseptic green. I woke up to the rhythmic whistling of a ventilator and the steady beep, beep, beep of a heart monitor. My chest felt like it had been cracked open. A nurse was standing over me, her eyes kind but tired. "Welcome back, Mr. Carter," she whispered. "You had a bit of a scare, a mild stroke and some cardiac distress. You're at Miami Valley Hospital." I tried to speak, but my throat was parched. She gave me a sip of water through a straw. "Buster," I managed to croak. "My dog, he's alone. The lights are off." Her face fell. She looked at a clipboard at the end of my bed. "Mr. Carter, your son was notified. He told us, well, he said he'd handle the dog, but he also signed a transfer order. He said you aren't fit to return home." "He's selling it," I whispered, the tears coming more freely now. "He took everything." The nurse, whose name tag said Elena, sat on the edge of my bed. She took my hand, the one that still worked. "I saw the notes, Raymond. He also filed a DNR, a do not resuscitate order. He said it was your wish." I felt a cold horror wash over me. I'd never signed a DNR. I wanted to live. I wanted to see the spring. I wanted to sit on my porch and watch the birds. Mark hadn't just stolen my money. He was trying to steal my very right to exist. He was waiting for me to stop breathing so he could finish his business. "I didn't sign that," I said, my voice gaining a ghostly strength. "Elena, you have to help me. He's lying. He's lying about all of it." She looked toward the door, then back at me. "You're his legal guardian now, Raymond. Without a lawyer or another family member to contest it, his word is the law here. And he's already stopped payment on your private insurance. The hospital is being told you need to be moved to a state-run hospice by tonight." State-run hospice. I knew what that meant. It was a place where they put people like me to be forgotten, a place of beige walls and the smell of bleach and slow, quiet endings. I lay in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling tiles, counting the little holes in the acoustic foam. 79 years.
I'd been a sergeant in the 101st Airborne. I'd held my friends as they bled out in the mud. I'd worked until my back was permanently bent. And here I was, being discarded like a piece of scrap metal from the factory floor. Around 7 p.m., Mark walked in. He didn't bring flowers. He didn't bring a card. He sat in the chair by the window, checking his watch. He looked at me, and for a second I saw a flicker of something. Guilt, maybe? Or maybe just impatience. "The transport will be here in an hour, Dad. I've arranged everything. It's a clean place. You'll have a roommate, someone your age. They'll make sure you take your meds." "What about Buster?" I asked. My voice was steady. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of hearing me beg. Mark looked away. "The dog was old, Dad. He was suffering in that cold house. I took him to the shelter. They'll find him a home, or, it was for the best. You couldn't take care of him anymore." I felt a roar of white-hot rage in my chest, more powerful than any heart attack. Buster was my last link to Martha. He was the only soul in this world who loved me without a price tag, and Mark had thrown him away like trash. "You're a coward, Mark," I said. The words were quiet, but they cut through the room like a blade. "You think because I'm old, I'm gone. You think because my body is tired, my mind is finished. But I remember every sacrifice I made for you. I remember the nights I worked third shift so you could have the best of everything. And I see you now. I see what you really are." Mark stood up, his face reddening. "Believe what you want. I'm the one holding the pen now. You're just a signature on a page that's about to be turned." He walked out without looking back. An hour later, 2 men in uniforms arrived with a gurney. They didn't talk to me. They talked over me, as if I were a piece of furniture. They loaded me into a cold van, and as we drove away from the hospital, I watched the lights of Dayton fade into the distance, wondering if I'd ever see the sky again.
The facility was worse than I imagined. It was a converted warehouse on the outskirts of the city, tucked behind a strip mall. The air was thick with the smell of unwashed bodies and cheap floor wax. My roommate was a man named Arthur who didn't speak. He just stared at the wall, his mouth hanging open. My bed was thin, the sheets gray and rough against my skin. I sat there for 3 days. I refused to eat the gray mush they called food. I just sat by the one small, barred window, watching the snow fall. I thought about the factory. I thought about the secret floorboard under the water heater in the basement of my house. Martha and I had put something there 40 years ago. Not money. We never had much of that. It was a box of records, a box of history. On the 4th day, a woman came in to clean the floors. She was older, maybe 60, with a weary smile and hands that looked like they'd seen as much work as mine. She looked at my untouched tray. "You gotta eat, honey," she said. "Otherwise, you're just helping them." "Helping who?" I asked. "The people who want you to disappear," she said, leaning on her mop. "I see it all the time. Kids drop their folks here, wait for the bank accounts to clear, and then wait for the phone call. Don't give them the satisfaction." I looked at her, really looked at her. "I need to get out of here, just for a few hours. I need to go home." She laughed, a dry, sad sound. "Honey, you're on lockdown. You're a ward of the state now. Your son made sure of that." "I have a dog," I said, my voice breaking. "He's at the Montgomery County shelter. He's all I have left. If I stay here, he dies. If I stay here, I die. Please." She stopped mopping. She looked at my VA jacket hanging on the bedpost. She looked at the faded tattoo on my forearm, the screaming eagle of the 101st. Her eyes softened. "My brother was in the 101st, she whispered. "He never came home from the Delta." She looked toward the hallway where the nurse was busy at the station. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a cell phone. "I can't get you out," she whispered, "but I can let you make a call. Who do you know that isn't your son?" I thought hard.
There was only one person, someone I hadn't spoken to in years because Mark told me he'd moved away. Joe Henderson, my foreman from the factory, my best friend. Joe picked up on the second ring. When he heard my voice, he didn't sound like he'd moved away. He sounded like he'd been waiting for me to call. Ray Carter, where the hell have you been, man? I've been calling the house for months. Mark told me you'd moved to Florida to be with some cousin. Joe, I choked out, I'm in a hellhole. Mark took the house. He took the money. He put me in a state hospice. He's selling everything. The silence on the other end was cold and heavy. He did what? Ray, I'm at the shop. I'm coming to get you. Where are you? I gave him the address. The cleaning lady, whose name was Mabel, stood guard at the door. I told Joe everything, the bank, the DNR, the house, and most importantly, Buster. Listen to me, Ray, Joe said, his voice dropping into the tone he used when the assembly line broke down and we had to fix it fast. I still have the spare key to your garage. You gave it to me 10 years ago, remember? I'm going to go to the house first. I'm going to see what's left. Then I'm coming for you. You be ready at the side door near the laundry room at midnight. Mabel, you hear me? Help him get to the laundry room. Mabel nodded, her face grim. I'll get him there. The next few hours were the longest of my life. I felt a surge of energy I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't health, it was purpose. I put on my VA jacket, I laced up my boots. I sat on the edge of the bed, watching the clock. At 11:59 p.m., Mabel appeared in the doorway. She didn't say a word, she just beckoned me. We moved through the darkened hallways, past the rooms of sleeping, forgotten people. We reached the laundry room. The air was hot and smelled of industrial detergent. Mabel cracked the side door. Outside, the snow was falling hard, a white curtain over the world. A pair of headlights cut through the dark. An old Ford F-150 pulled up, the engine rumbling like a familiar heartbeat. Joe stepped out, looking older, grayer, but still built like a mountain. He didn't say anything. He just hugged me, a brief, hard squeeze that told me I wasn't invisible yet. He helped me into the truck, but before he closed the door, I saw something in the back seat. A tail began to thump against the upholstery. A wet nose pushed against my ear. "Buster?" I gasped. "You found him at the shelter," Joe said, climbing into the driver's seat. "He was scheduled for the morning, Ray. 5 more hours and he'd have been gone. But he's here now, and we've got work to do." We drove through the silent streets of Dayton. Joe didn't head for his house. He headed for mine. "Joe, what are we doing?" I asked, my hand buried in Buster's thick fur. "Mark sold it. The movers were supposed to be there." "They were," Joe said, "but I saw the listing. The closing isn't until Friday. Mark's been staying there, Ray. He's been clearing out the junk. He's there right now, probably drinking your expensive bourbon and celebrating his windfall." We pulled into the alleyway behind my house. The lights were on. I saw Mark's SUV in the driveway. My heart hammered, but it wasn't the flutter of a stroke. It was the steady beat of a soldier going into the wire. "You remember that box you told me about?" Joe asked. "The one under the water heater?" "Yeah," I said. "I got it out before he saw me. Ray, you never told me what was in there. I thought it was just photos, but I looked. You really should have opened that box after Martha passed." Joe handed me a heavy, rusted metal tin. I opened it. Inside were photos, yes, but underneath them was a thick envelope. I opened it with trembling fingers. It was a deed, not to the house, but to a plot of land in northern Michigan, 40 acres of timberland Martha's father had left her, and stapled to it was a life insurance policy I never knew existed. Martha had kept it secret, a rainy day fund she'd paid into for 40 years with her egg money and sewing earnings. It was worth 3 times what the house was selling for. But there was something else, a small digital recorder. Martha had started using it in her final months to record her thoughts for me.
I pressed play. The voice was thin, but unmistakable. "Raymond, if you're hearing this, it means Mark has tried to do what I feared. He's always been greedy, honey. He's got his grandfather's streak. I've hidden the real papers. The ones he made you sign, I had our lawyer friend, Mr. Gable, look at them. They're not worth the paper they're printed on because I never signed off on the title transfer, and the house was in both our names. He forged my signature, Ray. I have the proof right here." I looked at Joe. He had a grim smile on his face. "Mark's inside, Ray. He thinks he's won. He doesn't know we have the recordings, the real deed, and a witness to his fraud." "Let's go," I said. I stepped out of the truck, Buster at my side, and walked toward my front door for the last time. I didn't knock. I used my key. Mark was in the living room, sitting in my chair, a glass of my scotch in his hand. He looked up, and for a moment he looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Dad? How did you get out?" I didn't answer. I walked to the center of the room. Joe followed me, holding the metal tin. Buster growled, a low, primal sound he'd never made before. "The game is over, Mark. I know about the forgery, I know about the insurance, and I know about the DNR." Mark stood up, trying to regain his posture. "You're crazy. You're senile. No one will believe an old man who just had a stroke over his own son." "They'll believe Martha," I said. I pressed play on the recorder. Martha's voice filled the room, detailing exactly how Mark had pressured her and how she'd caught him faking her signature. Mark's face went from pale to ghostly white. "You called the police from the truck," Joe said, checking his watch. "They're 2 minutes out, along with Mr. Gable. He's still practicing law, Mark, and he's very interested in seeing those papers you filed." Mark looked at the door, then at me. He didn't apologize. He didn't beg for forgiveness. He just looked angry. "You were supposed to be done," he hissed. "You're an old man. You're useless. What are you going to do with this house? You can't even climb the stairs." "I'm selling it, but not to pay your debts. I'm selling it because this house isn't a home anymore. I'm taking Buster, and I'm going to that land in Michigan. I'm going to build a small cabin where the air is clean and no one treats me like a ghost." The sirens wailed down the street. Blue and red lights flashed against the window's snow. I watched as the police led my only son away in handcuffs. There was no joy in it, only a profound, hollow sadness. I'd lost my son long before today. I stayed in the house one last night. Joe stayed with me. We sat on the floor, the furniture was already gone, and shared a pizza. The next morning, I packed one suitcase and Martha's photos. I walked out the door, locked it, and didn't look back. I don't have a lot of years left, but the ones I have belong to me. As I drove north with Joe and Buster, I watched the Ohio state line pass by. I am 79 years old. I am a veteran. I am a father. And for the first time in a long time, I am free.